some of you have seen some of those new features available already. But I'll take you through a few of these just to give you a bit of an overview of what's available and how it operates within Intacct as well. We'll talk about, I sort of separate it out in some of the categories in a sense. So looking at finance, we'll look at contracts, a bit of contracts in the end there. There's a bit of timesheets and I think some tax options that I just want to cover off to give an idea of some of the things that's become available. So the first one off the bat there, we'll talk about AP automation. There's a few more updates on that. So it has been out for a while already, but they keep enhancing on that and they will keep enhancing on it. So we'll talk about that one for a little bit. I'll show you again the process of what that looks like and what we can achieve with the AP automation. But they start to bring in the tax details or the tax amounts as well. So from a scanning perspective, you will bring that in. We'll go into the application shortly as well. After that, we'll have a quick look at the reconciliation of payments. So this is available in AP and AR. So anything that's matched together, invoices against credits or payments, all of that, there's now a new match sequence that you can set up to allow you to then, afterwards print out a document so you can see what that looks like and, what's been matched against each other. We'll also look at a quick one just on the AP invoices. So when we go through the payment side of that, there's a couple of things that's been enhanced there. It is still an early adopter, this one. So if you're interested, just let us know and we can get you on top of that. I'll have a quick look at the enhancement on the AR statements. So they've made a couple of changes. So obviously there are standard statements within Intacct. There is a few things that you would need to do if you want to take advantage of that one and if it's something that you want to use. So I'll take you through those. A couple of restrictions coming on the GL accounts on banks, and then we'll look at just a bit of streamlining from the GL Outlier Detection. So that's been around for ages, but just on the setup and activation of that, they've made it a bit easier. So if you're not using that, it is something that's worth considering and starting to look at that. We'll talk about retainage, as I'm saying. So this has been available in the construction module. Going forward, it is now available within accounts payable and accounts receivable without the construction module. However, if you do have a subscription to the contracts itself, then that one is not available at this point. Okay, so in mine, I'll go through what it does and what you can do on it, but I can't showcase all mine has got construction on. So we'll get back to this one and go through the details. On the next one, we'll look at contracts. There's a couple of things there just from a service period, bulk actions that we can do and our renewal templates that we can sync across. New things on the tax side. So a couple of enhancements that came in around the tax detail and then that tax submission for custom solutions. So at this stage, Australia, yes, it's there. It works through the tax submission portal. So that Sage repository that we've got. Things like New Zealand or any of the other solutions that we've got, you can also now start using that tax submission. So I'll take you through what that will look like if you're not using it already. And then a couple of other exciting ones just on the Sage Intelligent Time. So there's a new time clock that's coming out. So it's part of the release. They haven't actually activated that. So it's only I think it's this weekend coming. They'll bring that in, so we will have a quick look at what that entices or will bring to the solution and just talk about that. Okay, so for the finance side, I'll jump in and start with the AP automation. So generally, when we start looking at AP automation, these are some of the options that you'll have available when we look at that. Now, AP automation, that's the inbuilt one that they've released. So, we do have external options available. The inbuilt one is now within Intacct and you can subscribe to that, from a default perspective. The idea there is you can still email in documents to the, designated email address, or we can upload documents. So if we look at our accounts payable and purchase invoices, when you've subscribed, you'll have this new sort of section there that's got the upload and refresh options available. Now, what that means is we can bring in any invoices. Now, just from a upload perspective, if we do that, you can do it via email, as I mentioned. But if we bring it in, you can actually upload that in. So, one of those options, I'll drag and drop an invoice across. It'll create that document. You'll see it at the bottom, and you can see there's, we can do up to 30 in one go. So if there's more, you do it in batches of 30, or do that selection and bring it in. And there's a couple of options there as to what formats it can be in. On the detail side or the configuration side, we can also decide I want a single line. So it's just a summary of what we've got for that supplier, or I want to bring in all lines with the associated amount. So it can actually split that out. So doing that full read of the document. Now, when we bring that in, it will go in. I'll just do a quick refresh so you can see what happens there. So it'll go into that analyzing mode, and it'll start analyzing, reading the document, and then bringing it in. Some of the ones that I've completed already, just to give an idea, I'll open that up, and the standard information supply will be read. It'll attach the document for you. It does come in draft mode, so we do need to look at that. A couple of things that's not there at this stage. So the account, we can default that from the supplier. So if we set up any account details on the supplier, we can bring it in. But that is one of the fields that will be machine learned as well. So as you start processing these invoices through, the coding on accounts and any of your dimensions will be starting to learn and teach the system on what you do specifically. When we look at what Sage does with this, there's about 11 different machine learning avenues that goes through this. So there's 7 that's sort of generic. So if it's a multiple suppliers, that you onboard now, going forward, those will be available for any additional or any new customers using the software. So that process of identifying, let's call it a microchannel or a Telstra invoice, for instance, once it's started learning and understanding that invoice, anyone subscribing to the module afterwards will have a better option or a better experience there, because a lot of the details will be available. Now, things that they've started improving on, the transaction tax is also read from the document now. So initially it wasn't there. It was sort of calculated once we've done a few things. The one thing you still need to do at this point is enter the tax details. So if we've edited this document, sorry, I didn't actually edit it, but if you go into the edit feature there, you would just need to populate what that tax detail is and do that selection. Going forward, that will be in R1 or R2, I think they mentioned, that'll be something that the machine will start learning as well. So by default, as the more documents you process for that supplier and the codes that we select there, the system will sort of pick that up and reapply that the next time. Again, you still have that ability to change it, but it'll give you, a defaulted transaction in there at that point. Previously, when they've brought this in, I think I do have one of them. It actually didn't read the tax details, so the tax amounts would have been 0. So you can see those enhancements coming in and bringing it in. Part of this one is also including there's an early adopter now for the PO matching. So if we've done a purchase order, it's gone through your approval cycle, it's available in the system, and we receive the supplier invoice coming in via email or upload, and it's got that PO number on, it can do that matching for you and create the purchase invoice essentially, instead of just the AP invoice that we've got now. So that is out. It is an early adopter at this point. Also, again, due to be released early next year, first half of next year. So exciting things coming on that side. And as I say, they keep enhancing that, keep growing on what the capabilities from a learning perspective and what will be defaulted in as part of that process when we start reading this. The next one I just wanted to touch on is looking at that reconciliation of payments and credit. So what that means is, whatever we've matched together. So if we've made a payment out of AP, we applied it to many invoices, we can now have that matching on there as well. So what that allows us to do, so firstly on AP or AR, we'll go into the configuration and you will effectively need to create this sequence essentially, and I'm going to probably scroll past it. Oh, there it is. So there's that supplier reconciliation or customer reconciliation if you want to do it on AR. So we enable that and we assign a sequence there. So when we look at the sequence, it is something that you can set up, but it's an alpha sequence. So it's just a alpha letter that gets assigned to the transaction. So basically assigning that, what's the first sequence, what's our primary sequence, and you can see where we are now. So for the physical year, so each year it will reset, so you can start from scratch again, but you can see what that next sequence is, what it'll assign as we carry on. Okay, so the advantage there, as I said, once we go into the reporting side, you now have the ability to print out a supplier reconciliation or a customer reconciliation in that regard. So if we look at this and we say, look at the inception to date, for instance, I'll just do it for a particular location, and we'll view that. When we bring that in, it will effectively, you'll see there, it'll now have this match sequence. So it'll update the report or show you the match sequence, and you can see what's been matched together. So, wherever the C is, that's the invoice number, there's the payment for it as well. So you'll be able to reconcile that and ensure, what's still outstanding, what's been matched, and what we need to do. So you might not see it there, but the capital letter match, I don't know if I've got a partial one, not on this one. But if it is a capital letter, it is fully matched. If it's a lowercase letter, it's a partial match, so a partial payment or a partial credit applied to an invoice. You'll still have some visibility of, what's been applied or where this credit has been applied to as part of that one. Okay, now the next one, just looking at our payment enhancements. So this one is early adopter. So I don't have a full visual that I can show you. Just looking at, the help file that we've got available there as well. So on the release notes, that pay purchase invoices enhancement. So when we look at that, a couple of things that they brought through, looking at the details section there. So when we go into the payment, if you subscribe to that enhancement or to the early adopter one, we can then load up to 5,000 bills. So they've increased the volume there that we can do. You can also see what has been selected. So if we look at the selection there from the first one, new options to do selections and, how many of those were selected as part of this. They've added these sections there where we can filter and sort on the invoice number, the invoice date, and the due date as well. And then further enhance the option there to drill through. So if there's any credits available, you can drill through to the detail. And again, on that one, there's a couple of things that's been available. Those same filtering becomes available, and we can work through those. So a few things that they've brought into that AP payment option. At this stage, as I mentioned, early adopter, but normally with these early adopters, it becomes available quite frequently in the next release or just after that. On the next one, we do have an update to our accounts receivable statements. Now, for that, there is a bit of a work to be done. We can assist you with that, but it is not too complex. Now, the idea there is looking at enhancing what we've seen there. So one of the things that sort of were recommended by some of the customers would be a running balance or a running total on the statement itself. So when we look at that and we actually produce a statement, I've already updated mine. I'll show you the process now. If you run that statement, if it sends out or preview, so I'll just look at one of them. If we look at the details coming through, the things we normally have is the normal document amounts as we had coming through. But you can see on the total side, there is now a running balance. So each invoice will update. There's a payment that came through, so it'll deduct it. So you can see that running total as we go down. So easy way to visualize what's actually happening on the statement and what we're going to do there. Now, if you want to look at that, it is basically going into your platform services. I might quickly show you where that is as well, and if you've got access to that. So within your platform services, you can actually go in, and I normally hide mine at the top this time. There's our printed document templates, and we can download that statement. So if we look at, there's a statement itself, I can download that template. And essentially what that means is you'll have that Word template available, and it's basically, it'll take you through the process. We will add a new column in there, and it gives you the details of what that merged field is that we bring in. So that balance field that we'll bring into the report, and that will enhance the report for you. So a quick way to bring that through as well. There's some restrictions that were implied, so just sort of taking you through where we are. It's always a good idea. So just looking at the next one there. So from a restriction point of view, we'll touch on that one. When we look at the bank accounts, generally when we set these up, it was relatively open. So within cash management, if we set up a new account there, bank account, the GL accounts available for selection will be restricted. So generally you could have selected the AP account, the AR account, so any of those will now be restricted, and it's just, you know, available to particular accounts. So just giving you a bit more visibility there as to what we can allow and what's available for selection on that one. When we look at our streamlined GL Outlier Detection, so again, you know, this has been available for a while, but as we progress through the application, when we set this up, you know, there's a couple of things that we can allow to make it a bit easier. So if we look at the first side there, when we look at your subscriptions, it's now available in that AI machine learning. So within that configuration, once you've subscribed to that, we can activate that outlier detection there as well. And we can also, you know, do it for GL approval. So that's the big key there. We can actually enable that. And then once that machine learning starts happening, or the detection starts happening, you know, we can configure the GL side as to what needs to warn you. So I'll take you into the GL one as well, just on that config. When we get to the outlier section, you can define what that looks like. So part of this one is, again, you know, there's the customization, what we want to do there. And we can also decide where you physically want to do that detection as well. Is it on the user that creates the entry and wants to submit it for approval, or does it actually happen on the approval side where it shows you it's an outlier before you approve it? So those type of things we can start, you know, activating, and then obviously the machine learning will take that toll as well to start learning and you know, letting you know if a transaction is created on the GL side that's actually out of the norm that we expect from that one. The next one is just on retainage. Now, again, this is one that's probably not in there by default. It is one that's available for that construction, but again, I can't have the contracts module associated as part of this one. So with that process, unfortunately, on my demos, I've got contracts on all of them, so I can't activate it on my side. But essentially, it is available on accounts receivable and accounts payable, and we can go through those steps. So easy way to set it up. You basically add, you know, new GL accounts, one for retainage receivables, and then the release process afterwards as well. So, you know, it basically, when we pay a supplier invoice, for instance, and we've got those retainage set up, instead of having the full balance of that supplier invoice sitting on your, you know, normal control account, part of that is sitting in that retaining account. So it's still against the supply. We know where it is, but it stays there until we actually release that out, and it becomes payable afterwards. And the same on the receivable side. So it is something that we can create. It's visible there, and you do have the ability to then, you know, hold those retainers back and then release as we need going forward. So part of that, again, you know, one is we set it up, we create some transaction definitions for it, and then you can also set up a default percentage on customers and suppliers. So when we raise the invoice or create the invoice in the system, you know, it can default in that percentage for you if it is one of the suppliers that requires retainage or customers, and then it can automate that transaction and retain the amount separately to what we've got there. Okay, so that's the initial section around finance. Maybe just one thing that I didn't include there. On inventory control, we also had a bit of an update there, just from a item valuation perspective. So if any one of you uses the inventory module and you've done an item valuation in summary at the top level, you know, it includes everything for all the same currency into that valuation. But if you went to the detail, it didn't include everything. So they've updated that to ensure that, you know, if you choose to print that in detail, that's also now available, and you've got some visibility around that in the detail section. The next bit, we'll go through some of these just to give you an idea. So contracts, there's a few things on contracts that were updated. So if you, in that subscription side of things, there's a couple of things. So firstly, if we look at that service period, so that's quite an important one, you know, what they've done there. Looking at a particular contract in this instance, I'll go into the contracts and give you some idea of what they've done there. So I've set up a few contracts, obviously. When we start billing that out, you know, we also on the detail line now include that service period. So we can say, you know what, there's a subscription period. It's related to a particular year or particular month or quarter, whatever that service period is. When we start generating the invoices now, it is included on the details, so we can include it on the invoice. So that visibility to the customer is a lot more clearer. So again, if I go and generate an invoice, for instance, and we'll look at that particular contract that I had there. I think it was that one. I'll just preview that. Now, from that transaction amount that's coming through, we can draw through and look at the details. So you can see that service period start and end date is visible there. That pulls through to the actual invoice that gets generated, so we can actually produce that on the form that goes out to the customer as well. So that visibility just enhanced to make sure the customer is aware of what they're being charged for that particular contract or line of contract that we've sent through. A couple of things just on the revenue schedules that we manage around contracts. So looking at those, if we bring through, you know, there's a couple of bulk runs options there, but if we look at these management, they've now included a few other options there. So normally, yes, I can post those schedules, you know, in bulk, or we could have put it on hold or resume. We can now also bring in a clear function, so we can clear the results for revenue and expenses and restart that contract as well. So, you know, if it's gone through, it's something that we picked up that's incorrect, we can clear the results, get the transactions rolled back effectively, and then run the process again to get that out on both sides, revenue and expense. If your revenue is triggered from a delivery or a bulk or an action there that's required, so we can action that delivery as well. So as of a particular date, send that through, and we can then, you know, compile that list effectively to say, you know, all of those are delivered, and now we can actually post the revenue based on what we've done there. These filtering, they've also, you can see there's quite a few things added to that one. So a lot of detail added to the filtering, so allowing you to slice and dice effectively as to which contracts and which lines we want available, and include in the process when we go through this one. I think that's also a new one, the maximum number of records selected. So, you know, we can select what that looks like if you want to do that in more manageable chunks to bring it through. When we look at the post action, there's a couple of things there, especially on the expense line. So what I'll do is I'll just preview that, so it'll pick up all the lines that we need to do. So it's also included now, or added this expense line number in there, so we can draw through to that precise number of the expense, so we can see what it is. So that draw through now available, and we can visualize that. The same thing on the revenue, all of that's available. You can see everything before we actually send that out or generate the invoices at the back of that process. Things that they've changed, so we've done a filter there. If we change something that we want to do, you know, historically the result would have stayed there, and you could have just updated that. So they ensure now that we clear the search result, and we can preview that again. So that process there at the bottom has been enhanced to ensure that, you know, each time we make a change on selection, we load that first before we actually apply any updates, so you're sure that what you're looking at is actually the options that we want to change. Now, the last one looking there just on our contract section is really around our renewal template. So when we look at our contracts, Each of the contract, we can set up a renewal for it. So, next year we want to uplift this by 5% and we want to do this, 60 days before, the contract expires. So that renewal policy we can set on the contract line or on the contract itself. If there's anything that needs to change on those templates that we use to do the renewal, you do have the ability to now sync that across. So looking at that just from a management point of view, if I go into my contract section and we look at that renewal templates, that's the area that we can now change. Now looking at one of those, so there's 60-day no increase, for instance. So if we want to change that and say, instead of the 60 days, we just want to do that at, almost type 60 again, 30 days. If I save that, Intacct would now give you the option to select what we want to do with that result. Do we want to sync that across? So any of my open contracts that's got that renewal template available, I want to update them, or I want to save the change, but I don't want to sync it to the contracts. I want to go through them individually and update them as required. So it just gives you that flexibility to decide what you want to do if you make any changes to that renewal template that we use for the contract renewal. So again, that's basically just, if you look at a contract on the actual contract itself, it's probably just one of them in this particular one, but on this contract or on the line level, you do have that ability to set up renewal and then which template to use. So you can see based on the template that we selected there, I can update this one to say, that's the renewal template that's been used, and the rules behind it is now updated. So it's not just a 5% or the number of days, it's now 10% renewal update. So depending on, what that change is, we can do that in bulk and send that through. A couple of things just changed on the taxes. So quite important one, I think most of Australia knows about the tax submission option. So basically what that means is, in preparation of integration to the ATO, we've got the Sage repository that prepares your BAS submission effectively. So looking at, all of your tax setups, there's a couple of enhancements that was added there on that side to determine if, I would call it the GST box is included or not in the reporting side. And especially if you think about, non-localized or custom tax solutions that you might set up. So I'll handle both of those simultaneously. That solution is now, or that submission for custom tax solution is an early adopter. So you can basically select to activate that one and then allow that submission process to work through other custom tax solutions. But the change, that we've got there, when we look at our tax solution, firstly, on there, that was on the detail. There's a couple of things that I wanted to show you there. That was on the detail. One thing just to note, things that you might not be aware of. So that tax setup updates, you can actually update or install any updates. So if there's changes in the legislation, Sage would update that within the core setup. So if you want to update those, you can select that, save it, and it'll download and update the new submissions or new details that we want to bring through. On the details section, things that will come through as a standard there. So if we look at some of those Australian ones, for instance, there's a new tax filing option. Those will be pre-populated, obviously, and because it's localized here, that will be updated accordingly. Do we want to include it in reporting or not? So that's one of the enhancements, especially around the custom tax solutions that we want to bring into play. The other section there is if we go into our tax submission, really, that's a section where we create that new tax submission. It goes through, it picks up all of our transactions once we prepare it. So I'll just resume this one. And the thing that we do there is we take this into our regular reporting. So it is a section where we collate all the data and generate the report that we want available. I'll just run that process so you can see what it looks like. And it basically prepares that BAS submission for you. At this stage, because we don't have that full integration to the ATO, It just gives you all the boxes for that particular entity that we're looking at, all the boxes for the ones that we pick up from the system, so we can see what that looks like. It gives you that ability. If there's things that you need to maintain manually, you can update that. We can include any of the other PAYG fringe benefits that you want to include there, give you the full submission. From this section, I can export reports in there. There's my detailed report, adjustments, late transactions, anything that we want to bring out of this one. If we generate the PDF, it will mark those transactions as completed and ensure that we close this section off. So quite a useful tool, especially around reporting transactions, ensuring that have I included this in my submission or not. Once we do this, it'll mark those transactions, and if there's any late transactions in that same period, for instance, the next run will pick them up as late transactions that will be sitting there, and it can form part of your next submission, and again then updated accordingly. So this section enhanced or extended to any of our custom tax solutions as well. If you subscribe to that beta release or early adopter option there, you can then use the same sort of reporting structure. It goes into this regulatory reporting section in preparation and then available for download and reporting. Obviously, roadmap going forward, that generation will change to submit to the ATO or to, New Zealand tax authorities, for instance. So those type of things on the roadmap to bring in those direct integrations as well going forward. A couple of things just to take note of. There might have been some of the release notes that you've got visibility of what they are, so you can go in there. You'll see that there is a bit of Copilot and, detail analysis or analysis variance that's coming out. So those type of things they have released in the US already as early adopter. So all of those AI components are being worked on and tested effectively. So, from a roadmap perspective, those type of things are coming, Copilot coming into the application. We've got a bit of machine learning already there, but that keeps being enhanced as well. The one area, just from a time perspective, so when we look at Sage Intelligent Time, I've shown you a couple of those. Now, this one is due to come out at the end of the month as well. So in that maintenance window, they'll update this. And the option there, what they're triggering is really it's a Sage Intelligent Time clock effectively. So it gives the employees the ability to clock in and clock out, and ultimately that generates a timesheet for them to, at the end of the day or end of the week, decide, yep, that's all good. I understand all the clock in and clock outs. There's my timesheet. I want to approve that and send that through for the approval process. So a bit more options there as to how the time is entered. It's not just a timesheet that's being entered. There is a bit of enhancements coming in and visibility of what we've gone and added there. I've shown you the intelligent time as part of that process before, where we can bring in some of that AI from a description point of view, drag that across, integrate that to Outlook, for instance, as a calendar entry or mail activity. So bring that in as time entries. So that's still there and enhanced on. One additional one that they've added is we can now define standard project rates for billing. So if there's standard rates that you want to apply to a project, for instance, based on the employee that's entered the time, we can do that. Generally, I want to say that the old method is still available, where on the project we can actually assign the resource and assign the billing rate for each of them. We can now define default rates for a project instead of just the specific employee. Okay. So that in a nutshell is what we sort of added at this stage. If there's any questions, send them through either to myself or the team that we've got there. From an account management point of view, depending on where you're located, most of you should know who's your account manager as well. But we've got a few there. The top two is there in New South Wales, Victoria, Phillip, and then John O'Donnell's in Brisbane. So, anyone that's assigned to them, you can reach out to them as well if there's anything of concern that you want to bring across. And any additional information also available there on the website. or send it through to us for any queries on there.